Hello, and welcome or welcome back to Read Becca. It's been a week of Lovember reading, and it has been a grand old time for me. I hope if you're here watching the video, either you're participating in Lovember and share down below what you are reading, if you're at least having fun, even if you haven't quite hit as much as you'd like, or trying new things. That is always what excites me. It has been wonderful to see everybody's TBRs go up and comments from people saying what they have been reading. So I've been loving that. I've also had a really great reading week. So if you're not participating, I hope you're buckling in for a long list of books that I have read and finished this week. I read and finished 4 things, and I think overall I enjoyed all of them. No duds. That's always great. When you're trying really new and different things, it's easy for things to be a miss, and I didn't have any real misses. So let's jump into what I read this week, and feel free to share down below what you read. I would love to hear it. So the first thing I read was Battle Royal. I keep saying Royale. That is not right. By Lucy Parker. It's obviously a baking romance. I have talked about it at length previously in multiple videos, but especially I did a full vlog reading it in a single day. And that was a wonderful experience. So the gist of the story is that we have a woman who was kicked off of a very thinly veiled Great British Bake Off type show. She lost, and that was 4 years in the past, and now she's being brought back as a judge. And the guy who kicked her off, who is very much into the technical side of things and seems to be prim and proper, doesn't appreciate her style and whimsy, is going to be her co-judge. So she's going to have to learn to get over her distaste for him. So that's the premise. I think I already talked through the majority of the fact that there is a lot more plot to it than I expected. There is this element of not only are they judges for this baking show, but they're running their own bakeries, and they're in competition for a contract for the royal wedding cake of a princess. And that's what connects them in having to break down this enemies to lovers element. So it was great fun. I think the only things I didn't mention previously that I do want to make sure I mention is that there is a cat. I totally forgot. I don't know how, but there's a lovely, large, grumpy cat involved in this story who I adored. And then also the characters are actually older than I thought they were based on, I guess, the cover. They're actually nearing their 40s. So I do like to see romances that look at characters that are in that age range or older, because they tend to be kind of rare. Usually you're getting people who are in their young 20s for the most part in romance novels. So I just wanted to note those 2 things because I didn't mention them before. So let's jump on to the next one then that I haven't really talked about. But I read Zeni Next by Rebecca Weatherspoon. This is the second in the Loose Ends series, and I'm a little confused because at the end of this one, she specifically mentions a book coming out shortly after Zeni in this series, but I don't think it ever came out. So it was clear like that was all lined up, but I think there are only 2 books in this Loose Ends series, Rafe and Zeni, and I have read both of those now and enjoyed both very, very much. These are really, really great romances, and they are very much romances that are grown-ups having mature, respectful relationships, but they also have undeniable chemistry, so they get very steamy. I would not say it goes quite into erotica, but this is about the highest spice level before you get into erotica, I think, for me. So the story of Zeni, it has a subtitle of Marriage of Inconvenience, and I didn't register that. I hadn't even really looked at the plot, but that should have told me that this is about an arranged marriage, basically. Zeni is, at the beginning, dealing with the death of her aunt. So if you have any triggers for loss of a loved one, that certainly does happen here. It's not really a grief-filled book, though. It's a very happy book, and people are remembering and thinking back positively on the life of her aunt. But she winds up in this very contrived plot where, to get her inheritance, which is surprisingly large and unexpected, she has to marry Mason McInroy, a Scottish guy that her aunt had befriended. And this is a surprise to both of them. There are also some family secrets that come out that are very dramatic to do with the past as a result of her aunt's death. And so she's sort of reeling from and processing those while also having to decide what she wants to do about this marriage. And predictably, of course, they both decide that, yes, it's beneficial to them to go along with this, but of course they're going to annul it right away. And they decide to actually just go ahead, and if they're going to do it, let's just throw a party and have fun about it, but we won't really treat it like it's serious. So they tell a few people locally. Her aunt does live in a very different area from where she is living. And it sort of gets a small town vibe, I guess, from a big city type of lady to a small town, and Mason McInroy has that feel of spending a lot of time on a farm, and we get to go visit a farm and see local makers, things like that. So it has a very, very cozy feel, and she's very welcome, Zeni is, to this community immediately because of this, and everyone is kind of like, so you're married to Mason now, huh? So it's that great feel, but it also, unlike a lot of small town type vibes, has a lot of progressive elements where she and Mason are dealing with kind of a baggage in their histories. They also have the element that they're both bisexual. And I loved that this talked through some of the myths and misconceptions about being bisexual, and that they had both kind of dealt with difficulties in their past relationships as a result of those misconceptions about who they were. And so I loved that it addressed that very head on. And like I said, kind of up front, this is really about grown-ups having very mature relationships, in that they have those direct conversations. They aren't scared to just hit things head on and tackle them and work through them. Even though they don't really think that this is going to go anywhere. They just want to be grown-ups who are able to coexist together, basically, by being respectful with each other in that way and being open and honest. And I just loved to see that. As far as the heavy elements, I will definitely give warnings here for things like reproductive coercion, miscarriage, and abortion. Those are all discussed, not heavily, briefly, but they are definitely present within the story. So, as far as the steamy elements, I will say really fantastic writing there. I have always enjoyed Rebecca Weatherspoon's writing in the steamy scenes, and this is very high spice. It also does verge into kink territory. So if you're not on board for a little bit of that, that definitely does happen here. Nothing like overwhelming or anything that for me was too extreme, but it's definitely there. I enjoyed reading these characters so much because they feel very realistic and tangible. They feel like real people you would know, and they have very true relationships that are complex with the side characters. So that all feels very believable, and their backstories, the difficulties that they've been through with their own families, with their past relationships, are very much laid out on page. So you are really getting this very layered approach to telling us about who these characters are. And that's one of the things that I love about romance so much, is that you have to attach to the characters. And so authors that are really doing romance well are writing you these incredible character-driven stories, and that is what I liked so much about this book. So this was definitely, like, this series is fan-friggin-tastic. If you are into romance at all, I would highly recommend you check out the Loose Ends, I guess, duology or series by Rebecca Weatherspoon, because it's great. The one thing that I have to nitpick on is that this one definitely had some editing needs that were not met. The book was fine. Writing is great. There were no like egregious errors, but there were a lot of missing words or incorrect words throughout this. So it just didn't have the level of polish that I expect from Weatherspoon. And I think this one was self-published as well. So even in the self-published sphere, I do expect to have, a very polished product and judge it based on that. And it wasn't quite there. So this was on the lower end because of that, but it was still like a really high 4-star to just above a 4-star, I think, even with that aspect. So really, really enjoyed Zeni. The next one, or really the next two, were not as much of wins, but I still enjoyed them. So the next one I read was How to Catch a Wild Viscount by Tessa Dare. And as it turns out, this was a reissue of her first novel. And it was something about a were-stag initially title. And that is what it's about. So we're following a woman who has come to a manor house with her friends, basically, and they're talking about the curse on this property of this were-stag. And so they all go out into the yard at night to hunt out the myth of this were-stag. And of course she has a sudden encounter with it. But in the meantime, we're getting all of this internal debate for her of the love between this man who's very brooding, Luke, and who has, I think, been off to war and come back and just is a very hardened person. And then the other guy is Denny, who she should be going for. Like, it's the natural choice for her to go for Denny, but she just keeps coming back to Luke. And so of course, this whole short, it's a novella, is all her back and forth internally over these two guys, and the fact that she really has this chemistry for Luke, but he doesn't seem to want her. And on this whole dramatic element of the werestag and whether or not there is really a curse on this property, and kind of these dramatic things that are happening. So I have read Tessa Dare before, and the previous book that I read from her was very enjoyable from a writing perspective, but I really didn't like the progression of the romance. Here, the writing was not anywhere near on par with the previous book I had read. So I think this being her first work, she hadn't really developed in the writing area yet. So I can see kind of those touches, but writing was not on par. The characterization and the development of the romance was much more to my taste than the previous one I had read. So we kind of flip-flopped on the elements that I liked. But seeing this, this was a bit more serious, but it still had moments of levity. And that showed me that I do think I want to read more from Tessa Dare, because she can deliver a couple I really get behind. Even though both of the books I've read from her now were not real wins, I think she could get there. If we can get this type of coupling with the writing that she has later on, it will be in my wheelhouse of what I like. So this was very short. As far as the spice level, I would say it was middle of the road. It is open door on the page, but there were brief scenes and they were not terribly gratuitous. So I think that's it for How to Catch a Wild Viscount. The final one that I read was New Year, New Planet by Marina Simcoe. I'll put it on the screen. And this was predictably a fun, entertaining read. It tried to engage in some heavier topics, and I'm not sure I got completely on board with those fully. But I did have fun with it, so that was a win, I think. The story is off the wall. We are following a human woman, mainly, who is a flight attendant she has been a flight attendant on Earth in the past, but she became kind of one of the innovators of being a flight attendant in space, and is doing these kind of long-term, multi-day flights, I guess. And so on New Year's Eve, one of her fellow flight attendants invites her to go on a double date with her, with these aliens, the Aldrai, who are potentially looking forward to having a mating program with humans, because that's possible, and there are specific breeding reasons why they might want that, where it would be beneficial. So we get to hear about their mating and why this alien mating works right up front. So, which is kind of funny. I don't read a ton of alien romance, but I think that's pretty par for the course there. So she goes on this date, but she is kind of that person who doesn't live her life so much. She acts as if she has all these adventures because she is traveling all over and seeing the world, or the many planets. But she's not really going out and having adventures for herself. She's just working. And in the same way, at this date, she's not really on board with the date. She kind of has a good time, but isn't totally into the idea of a one-night stand with a guy she's never going to see again. So she has fun, she has a dance, she has a kiss at midnight, and she goes home. And the next day, things have kind of gone wrong with her friend, and she has to go take her place on a flight. Well, this flight, everything goes horribly wrong. And this is kind of the pitch for the book. Everything goes wrong on the flight, and she winds up stuck on a planet with the guy she had the one date with. So what I really liked is the sense of fun and getting on board for a very action and adventure filled book, and the fact that this guy she didn't know but had obvious chemistry with. It wasn't like undeniable, but she had an attraction. They got along, like they certainly were able to talk and converse easily. To go from that to suddenly being alone together, more or less, on the planet, there's someone else with them who's kind of a third wheel and is dealing with trauma, as well as this tiny, strange animal. And that was a little odd to have that in the background while they're sort of having longing looks at one another and eventually getting steamy. but anyway, the two of these people, or the person and alien, then are sort of on the run for a few days and get very much closer and just trying to survive. And that survival element and them just trying to keep going was oddly fun, oddly entertaining, despite the fact that nothing is really happening other than there being a sense of dread. The sense of dread has to do with them being attacked by other aliens. And Grakes, our guy here, is military in his world, and so it's kind of natural that he understands how to deal with the situation a bit, and that he becomes very protective in the situation. And so I think that was worked in a way that felt true, and I think that's a draw to alien romance, is the guy being very protective to an overprotective degree, perhaps. And here, it didn't reach that point of being like controlling or overbearing with her or taking away her agency at all. So I felt that was done well and to a level I liked personally. But if you're more of a sci-fi alien romance reader, that may be a draw for you to know. Some of the other heavy elements, though, I don't know that they were done in a way that I felt was necessarily working. Things like both of these characters having a background where they have difficulties with their family, and I didn't love that both of them seem to feel if you don't have relatives, you don't have a family. And I'm totally opposed to that. So, I mean, yeah, I don't think there was a heavy focus on that. It was kind of brought up and discussed clearly that that's their view, but then moved along. It didn't really linger on that point. And I felt like that was how it was with all of the heavier elements that we kind of touched on. There were a couple of moments that I didn't really like, but again, I think it plays into sci-fi alien romances as well, to the tropes that are standard, that we had almost sexual assault baiting. I don't know what else to call it, but it appears that there's going to be some sort of sexual assault, and then fortunately here it doesn't happen. So maybe spoiler for you, but we don't get any essay on the page. And I didn't love that. I mean, it kind of made sense why it was there, but wasn't really a fan. So this one, as I said, was fun and really entertaining, but I did have to kind of ignore certain elements in order to enjoy that. So this was a mixed for me. I did like the story as a whole. I do think I would read more potentially from this series. This is a whole series of holiday tales, and I'm assuming that all of the monsters or aliens that get into the romances in the story have tails, because we definitely have a prominent tail element here. And they also are all set at holidays, so this one obviously was set at New Year's Eve. That wasn't a big part other than the date at the beginning, though. So I do wish there had been maybe more holiday to this. As far as the spice rating, this was very spicy, not quite as descriptive as Zeni, I would say, but it certainly gets graphic. It's open door, on page, fully described, including the tail stuff. So if you're in it for that, yeah, definitely check it out. It was a good time. So that is what I read. I rambled on as usual, much too long. So let me know down below what you are reading. I am so looking forward to hearing about everybody's week 1 and hearing what great books you are reading so that I can get some ideas to pick up in week 2. I do already have a massive slush pile and only one book remaining from my TBR this week that I have not started yet. So I will probably get to that book and maybe start my slush pile. We will see. So that is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and a happy Lovember to you.